Podcasts on unctv.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Funding for In the Garden is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV, and by the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at North Carolina State University. Additional funding is provided by the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, presenting TarHeelGardening.com, your online gardening resource for North Carolina plants, professional advice, and more.
Coming up, want to grow flowers that will brighten the home, both outside and in? Try a cut flower garden. I'll tell you which plants are a cut above the rest, next. Hi, welcome to In the Garden. I'm Bryce Lane. A cut flower arrangement can brighten just about anyone's day. And for gardeners, the ultimate satisfaction is to be able to cut flowers from their own garden to either give away or bring indoors. On today's show, I'll show you a host of plants that are great for cut flower arrangements. Plus, we'll hear about research to ensure that growers offer a mix of flowers with exceptional quality. This is Allison Carlson, a graduate student in the Department of Horticultural Science at NC State University. And Allison is doing floricultural research, especially with cut flowers. Allison, now I know we're out here in a flower bed, but could you tell us where we are and what we're looking at?
Well, these are research plots for the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers cut flower trials. What we do is we get seed of the latest and greatest new cultivars for use as cut flowers, and we trial them, figure out how productive they are, and we do post-harvest trials on them.
Now, when you figure out how productive they are, what kinds of things are you looking at relative to their performance out here in the field?
Well, we plant them all in plots of 16, and we randomize those plots throughout the field so they each get equal treatment, and then 3 days a week we cut them at their optimal stage of harvest, and we measure their length, and then we get a number of how many per plot.
Which really indicates how productive they would be in a commercial setting, right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, I see that we've got a huge bed of marigolds here. In addition to marigolds, what other kinds of flowers do you have are you trialing here?
Yes, many varieties of marigolds. We always have a zinnia in the trial. This is a deep red zinnia. It's absolutely gorgeous. We also have two others. We have giant lime and queen red lime. The zinnias always do very well in our trials. And we have Asclepias, excellent cone flowers, celosia, just everything you could imagine.
Well, now the cone flowers are perennials, so you're trialing not just annuals but also perennials for cuts.
Exactly. We do the annuals for a year, and then the perennials we keep for 2 years, so we can compare between years and how well they do.
Well, tell me now, are these plants treated typically like they would in a commercial setting? You just plant them out? I mean, do they get fertilized, watered, that kind of thing?
Well, you know, they get watered. We irrigate them with drip tape, which is fairly typical of commercial cut flower growers. But we don't give them any special treatment aside from just, you know, what they need. We actually give them probably less than what a commercial cut flower grower would give them. Zinnias are usually supported with some sort of support net so that they grow upright and you get good stem length. But we don't do that. We want to know how they're going to do with the bare necessities.
Well, now, in my garden, I've got zinnia, and I see marigolds in other people's gardens, and they're all real short, and those varieties wouldn't lend themselves very well to cut flowers. So these are actually specifically designed for cuts, is that correct?
Yes, they're different from those garden varieties you were talking about. These are bred to be taller and have the great stem length that you need to put into bouquets and have a good stem length.
Well, now, are these cultivars and varieties of flowers available to homeowners so that they could put them in their garden and then cut their own?
Yes, we get all these seeds from seed companies that anyone can buy from. They're on the internet. You can get them.
Well, that's great. So there's a lot of time spent out here in the fields, even in the heat of the summer, to keep these plants growing and getting a lot of good information. Is that right?
Yes, we usually try to cut early in the morning when it's not so hot.
I understand.
But yes, we spend a lot of time out here, and it's always a good time.
Well, Allison, thanks for sharing us about this information with the specialty cut flower trials. There's a lot of good research going on at NC State, and we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you for coming out here.
Allison, I know your master's research is on one of my favorite garden plants, Eucomis, and here we are amongst all these flowers. Tell us about your research.
Well, as you know, Eucomis is a bulbous herbaceous perennial, and the goal of my research is to bring Eucomis from the outside as a landscape plant to the inside as a cut flower. So I'm working on to figure out how to get it to be commercially grown. So I'm figuring out how to plant it in the greenhouse, and then how to plant it out in the field, and then how to get it to be very productive for the growers. And then I bring it inside and I subject it to various post-harvest treatments. Various vase solutions, storage treatments in the cooler, to see what gets the longest vase life.
So the idea is to figure out the best way to extend the vase life of these flowers for the cut flower growers, and then ultimately when people get them as a cut flower. Is that
Exactly.
right?
So I'm trying to figure out how to tell the growers how to treat this cut flower, so that way when it gets to you, the consumer, it lasts the longest for you.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about what you're finding out, because these Eucomis flowers look absolutely stunning. Did you just cut them?
No, these Eucomis, they last a very long time. These were cut about 3 weeks to a month ago.
Really?
And they're still absolutely gorgeous. So it's very easy to get at least a month's vase life out of these flowers.
Okay, so what are the secrets? I mean, when should you cut the flower when it's out in the field, and then how should you treat it?
Well, it's actually very simple, no tricks. You cut it when about a third to a quarter of the florets have opened, and you put it into just plain old tap water. Nothing special.
Now, is it important to switch that water out, or just put it in water and leave it in there?
Well, the great thing is that the stems don't carry a lot of bacteria with them, which is what clouds up the water and potentially makes the flowers die. And you don't really need to change out the vase water as often with Eucomis as you do with some other cut flowers, because the stem on Eucomis doesn't carry a lot of bacteria, so the water doesn't get very cloudy.
Allison, are there any special tips when it comes to cutting these flowers before you bring them inside?
Well, just one thing in particular, you want to cut them early in the morning when they're fully hydrated, and make sure you water them the night before or the day before, so that way they'll stay straight and upright. Otherwise, you'll see the stem flop over.
So where did all these flowers come from? I mean, how many are here, and where did they all come from?
Well, these all came from the research plots out in our cut flower fields. There is close to 400 stems just in here.
Wow.
And Bryce, this summer I cut over 1,000 stems
Just
of
from
Eucomis,
that row out
just
there.
from that row out in the field.
So a homeowner could grow it as a garden plant and enjoy it as a cut flower, even from their own garden.
Exactly. And as the flower matures in the vase and out on the plant, all the flowers open, and then it gets these lovely seed pods all up the stem. So it has great lasting power.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm excited because I've got Eucomis in my garden, and I intend to put some more in and use it as a cut flower. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now, just because it's the end of August and the beginning of September doesn't mean we can't enhance our gardens by planting plants. Now, granted, it's the end of the season, but we still have a few good months for growing. Not only that, but we can plant flowers that we can use to cut and bring indoors for flower arranging and flower arrangements. Now, what's great about this time of year to plant is the plants can get established. There's enough rainfall, the days are warm and sunny, and the nights are cool and crisp. So that promotes lots of flowering. So don't be afraid to enhance your garden with some perennials and annuals that will give you good color for the next few months. Now, speaking of plants for using for cut flowers to bring inside from your own garden, there are some really good old standbys for cut flowers that you need to put in your garden. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what is a characteristic of a good flower for cutting? First of all, we want that flower to be of pretty good size and on a long stem. These black-eyed Susans are a perfect example of a large flower at the top and a nice long stem. That gives us flexibility when it comes to the kind of vases we might use for these flowers. Not only that, but the flowers last a long time. If you were to use David phlox, that beautiful white flowering phlox, for a cut flower, initially it would look great in a vase. But within 24 hours, most of those small white flowers would just blast. And when we use the term blast, that means the flowers just pop right off. It makes a mess, and it really doesn't add to that arrangement. So you want to choose plants that have nice flowers, long stems, and that will last a long time. So let's talk about some of those plants that we could put in our gardens and also use indoors. There's some great black-eyed Susans that enhance the summer garden, but also are great for cutting. Let's look at some of those cultivars. Here's one of my favorites. This one is called Rudbeckia hirta Irish Eyes. Now, the Irish Eyes black-eyed Susan actually doesn't have a black eye. Take a close look at the flower. You can see that the center of the flower, this composite flower, is green, and that's where it gets the name Irish Eyes. It'll grow about 2 feet tall, full sun, and it's known to flower quite readily all summer long. And then in the fall, when the temperatures get a little bit cooler, it'll flower even more. Now, some might call this a perennial, but really in North Carolina, it's kind of a tender perennial to annual. You'd be happy if it came back the following year. Not a big deal. You can go and get more the following year. Now, take a look at this black-eyed Susan. This one's called Denver Daisy. Check out the center of that flower, that deep, dark, rich burgundy, almost black color around the center, and then the yellow petals radiate on out. This one grows about 2 to 2.5 feet tall. It's a very reliable flower, and as it gets a little bit bigger, these flowers get even larger, maybe even up to 6 inches. Now, don't forget, there's Indian Summer, which is a nice traditional black-eyed Susan, and there are a number of other cultivars that grow tall and that also have small spoon-like petals of flowers. They're very much smaller and would add a nice touch to an ornamental display inside. Of course, you know, we mentioned the cone flowers already on today's show, but the cone flowers are a wide variety of cultivars. That good old-fashioned purple cone flower, but there's yellow and cream color. I've got some planted down in here. And take a look at the Coreopsis, the tick seed. Now, tick seed is a perennial in North Carolina. It'll come up every year. Starts flowering in early June, and you'll get a number of flowers. Has a long stem. There's that characteristic. You can come in and cut it, and it'll enhance a cut flower arrangement. Now, if you look at this cultivar, it's called Corey. And Corey cultivar is noted by having a little bit of burgundy around the center of the flower. Now, folks, the salvias, some work real well and some don't work very well. The salvias that don't work very well are the Greggii type, the perennial types of salvias, because the flowers don't hang on very long and they have somewhat of an odor that some people might not like. I think it smells good. It's kind of spicy, but it's really not a good flower when it comes to how long it lasts. But look at this blue salvia. Notice the long stems and that cloudy blue color. It's a great salvia to use in an arrangement. And the blues go very well with the yellows from the black-eyed Susans and the Coreopsis. Of course, don't forget this group right here. These are the Gerbera daisies, Gerbera jamesonii. Now, here's a perennial plant in most of North Carolina, and it starts flowering in mid to late May, early June, and check out these big, beautiful flowers. What's so great about the Gerbera daisies is the flowers come out from the center crown, and so there are no leaves on the main stem. That makes for a great cut flower, and these flowers, if treated correctly, will last up to 2 weeks in a vase with water. And that's a really good flower to use for that purpose. Now, the Gerberas come in pink, yellow, and red. My favorites are the yellow and the reds. And folks, don't just plant it in the garden. You can even use a planting of Gerbera in a container to use on your deck or patio and still get those lovely flowers to decorate that area as well as in the vase. Now, there are a number of other plants that you can use for cutting that may not be as traditional. Take, for instance, the hydrangea. Hydrangea paniculata. This cultivar is Brussels lace. You can cut the flower as it starts to emerge, and there are some that are flowers that are fertile and some flowers that are sterile. That beautiful panicle shape adds to an arrangement. But don't stop there. You might even use some of the flowers that came on in early June, late in the summer. Notice the pink coloration on the sterile flowers. It's almost like a dried arrangement. Now take a look at this sedum. We use sedum autumn joy and other cultivars of sedum for arrangements indoors. A little bit non-traditional. You have that large ball of flowers at the tip. You cut the leaves off and incorporate that into your arrangements. This one's got more of a burgundy colored leaf, and even though the flowers haven't opened, you can still cut it and the flowers will open. So these are just a few of the plants that you can incorporate into your garden and use for cut flowers indoors. If you're cutting flowers from your garden and bringing them inside to display in vases, you need to support that arrangement with foliage. So you need to go right back out to your garden and cut plenty of foliage for those arrangements as well. Lots of really neat plants that we can grow in our garden to augment those indoor arrangements with foliage. One of those plants is the coleus group. Lots of different types of coleus, sun coleus, shade coleus. But folks, look at all the beautiful colors that you can use to enhance those floral arrangements. Here's one beautiful burgundy colored cultivar of coleus. Now there are a few simple things to remember when you cut foliage to use in your arrangements inside. First thing, cut early in the morning when the plants are fully hydrated. If it's been dry, water the night before so that they'll be nice and hydrated that morning, and that especially goes for coleus. Then when you cut it, cut way back toward the bottom, and I'm looking for a stalk here. Cut it way down toward the base so it doesn't look like the planting has been disturbed. There, I've cut it. Now once you've cut it, you want to make sure that you set the height relative to the vase and make sure none of the lower leaves are going to end up in the water. And that just involves taking your pruners and cutting the leaves off the lower sections. And once you've cut those lower leaves off, then you'll have a naked stem. You don't want these leaves to be in the water because that promotes diseases and will decrease the vase life. Now once you've got it like this, one more cut at the base at an angle, and you're ready to put it in your vase. So this would be a very simple way to enhance those arrangements with foliage. Now folks, there are lots of other plants in the garden we can use for foliage in arrangements. Take the ferns. If you've got some shady areas, plant ferns. Ferns provide great texture for those indoor arrangements. And there are three ferns that you might think about. One is called holly fern. Now holly fern has beautiful shiny fronds that are quite large and a deep, deep, rich green. Really adds a lot to an arrangement. Now there's some more fine textured fern. There's lady fern, and notice how the fronds are very fine textured. You want a fern that has real upright fronds, then go with the Christmas fern, which has a blue-green leaf. Those are just three ferns of many that you could use and enhance in your arrangements. Remember, you just pulled the lower fronds off like I did on the coleus with those ferns as well. There are even some woody plants that'll work out real well. Here's one called Danae racemosa, poet's laurel. That's a beautiful medium-sized shrub, grows about 18 to 24 inches. It's evergreen and it's perennial, but look at that deep, rich green of foliage. Notice the way the foliage grows, and that would really be a great thing to use in an arrangement, that nice equal foliage texture and size. You just cut those, bring them in, put them in your arrangement. That gives a deep, rich, dark color. Well, how about a little pizzazz? How about the variegated knotweed? This is variegated Japanese knotweed. It's a great plant called Falopia japonica variegata. Look at the leaves, heart-shaped. They look like they've been splashed with green and white. This can add a lot of accent to any arrangement with flowers and other types of foliage. So you can see, if you think about what you might want to bring in and use in your containers, you can landscape in your garden with these plants. There are a few simple steps in creating an indoor flower arrangement out of the plants you have growing in your own garden. The first thing is to get up real early in the morning to go out and make your cuts. Get a bucket, fill it with water, and then use that to put your flowers in to keep them fresh. Fully hydrated plants in the morning don't have a lot of heat load, and that will help those plants survive longer in the vase with water. Okay, the second thing you need is a good pair of pruners or sharp scissors. The sharper the blade, the better. You want to make good, fresh cuts, and you'll be doing that the whole time you make the arrangements. Now I'm going to cut some of the Salvia farinacea here. This is called Victoria Blue. It's a beautiful plant for cutting, but when you cut, you want to cut way down low to get long, long stems. Now sometimes, folks, that might even involve cutting more than what you need. You always want to cut it longer than what you think you'll need. Notice I cut this stem here, and I've got 3 or 4 flower heads that I can choose from. Take that and put it down in the bucket with the stem in the water. You want to make sure that you cut plenty of stems of the flowers that you think you'll need. Certainly more than what you think you'll need. Well, I think with this blue salvia and all the other plants I've cut, I'm ready to go put an arrangement together. Well, home flower arranging is not that difficult. It's actually pretty easy if you follow a few basic steps. And even I can make a decent arrangement, and I'm not that artistic at all. But thankfully, we've got some nice plants to work with. Now, the first thing you want to think about is your vase. Pick a vase and think about the arrangement that you want to have with those flowers in that vase. Fill it about 2/3 with water and mix that water with a floral preservative. Now, floral preservatives are available at garden centers and at florists, and it's really important to put it in the water because it has an antibacterial agent and it provides some food for the plants. All right, now I'm going to take my pruners and I'm going to use this Irish Eyes Black-Eyed Susan as my basic flower for the bouquet in the middle of this. Now, one basic principle, you always want to recut the stem before you put it in, and that way you can adjust the height. And also remove the leaves. Any leaves that are going to be in the water just promote disease and problems in the water. So you want to get those leaves out of there, and you can pull them off or cut them off. I'm going to keep these 3 stems together and place that in there. Now you can see it's a little bit taller than what I want, so I'm going to just cut a little bit off. So I'll grab some of these others and I'll do the same type of thing. Another easy way to get the leaves off, folks, is just take your hand and you can strip them off. You don't have to worry about pruning them. And that's a good way to do it as well. Cut and measure. You always want to cut and measure as you go through this process. Now remember, repetition is a really good thing to use in flower arranging. You don't have to use lots and lots of different kinds of plants, just 2 or 3 different types. The one principle that you want to follow when you do flower arranging is to not do even numbers of flowers. It's important to use odd numbers of flowers or bunches of flowers, and I think that's about what I need there. And there you go, a nice yellow-based flower arrangement with a little bit of purple involved for the kitchen table. Now, folks, one thing to remember about this arrangement, in order to keep it lasting long, and that's called post-harvest physiology, it's really important to come in and change that solution of floral preservative and water, change it every 2 to 3 days. And if you give a fresh solution in 2 to 3 days, these plants might last as much as a week to 2 weeks before they start to die. And you can enjoy these beautiful flowers that you grew in your own garden right on your dining room table. Our plant of the week was suggested to us by Bobby Williams of Castalia, North Carolina. Bobby, thanks for that suggestion, and we'll send you an In the Garden t-shirt. Folks, remember, send your suggestions for a plant of the week into our website or our Facebook page. And if we use your suggestion on the air, we'll send you an In the Garden t-shirt as well. Well, Bobby suggested a great black-eyed Susan that works well in the garden and as a cut flower. This is Rudbeckia subtomentosa Henry Ehlers, the sweet black-eyed Susan. Now, this plant is native to southern Illinois in the Midwest and was actually collected and discovered by a nurseryman and famous horticulturist by the name of Henry Ehlers. He named it after himself. He found it along the railroad tracks because back in the early 1800s, when the railroad was built through the Midwest, they often laid the tracks right through the prairie area, and they didn't bother cultivating the soil or moving the plants out of the way, and they put the tracks right down. So a lot of the remnant native plants were found along the railroad tracks, and that's where this sweet black-eyed Susan was discovered by Henry Ehlers. Now, it's a herbaceous perennial that grows about 5 to 6 feet tall in full sun and a well-drained soil. Folks, look at the profuse flowers that show up about the middle to end of July and flower well into September. Now, this isn't your typical black-eyed Susan. If you look at the composite flower, it's yellow with a black eye, a black center, but if you look at the tubular flowers that come out around the outside, they're actually shaped like a tube with an opening at the end that's bright yellow, and that gives it a real soft texture. Now this plant grows about 5 to 6 feet tall, and oftentimes in gardens it needs to be staked or supported so it doesn't flop over. But as long as you plant it around other plants that might support it, it'll look just as nice as it does right here. But folks, this plant's claim to fame, and while we're using it as a plant of the week, is because of its great opportunity to be used as a cut flower. It has that reputation for a long vase life and nice long stems. So you can create a bouquet like this, put it in a vase, change the water every couple days, and it'll do just fine. Folks, this is a great plant of the week, Rudbeckia subtomentosa Henry Ehlers, the sweet black-eyed Susan. Well, that's about all the time we have for this week. So until next time, I'll be looking for you in the garden.
To register for In the Garden, the course, call NC State's Distance Education Program at 1-866-GO-STATE. That's 1-866-467-8283. Or log on to distance.ncsu.edu. For more information about the program or to suggest a plant of the week, go to unctv.org/inthegarden.
Funding for In the Garden is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV, and by the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at North Carolina State University. Additional funding is provided by the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, presenting TarHeelGardening.com, your online gardening resource for North Carolina plants, professional advice, and more.
Podcasts on unctv.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.